Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Today on Another View, it's all about loving life so you can have a great love life. Our favorite relationship expert, Alvean Lyons, is with us, along with her new podcast partner, Doug Weiss, author of Life, Love, and Internet Dating. We're in for a treat as this ebony woman and ivory man shows us how loving God and loving ourselves can lead to a fantastic love life. Relationship advice if you're looking for Mr. or Ms. Right, are already in love, or need to jumpstart the love in your marriage again. Love Life. It's next on Another View, so stay tuned.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Before we get started with our Love Life show today, and trust me, it's going to be great, let me tell you about an event that I think is really special. The city of Norfolk is holding an event called Community Play In and Sing Along. Now, this is going to be presented by the city of Norfolk and the Virginia Symphony Orchestra. It is next Sunday, September the 10th. From 4:30 until 6 p.m. at the Half Moon Cruise and Celebration Center. And what they're doing is bringing orchestra members, and they want you, the public, to bring your instruments, come sit down and play with them. There'll also be choirs, so if your instrument is your voice, you can come and sing along. We'll have patriotic music. There will be symphony classics, spiritual hymns, and it's just going to be a whole lot of fun. It is completely free. It is open to everyone. I have the honor and pleasure of serving as the MC for this evening, so that ought to be a lot of fun because I have no idea what to expect. But we're going to all come together and just through music, spend some time together and unite together as a community. So if you want to know more information, please go to norfolk.gov/unity concert. norfolk.gov/unity concert. And it should be a good time. Absolutely. So, once upon a time, there was this 70-something-year-old man who worked his way through the end of a relationship by writing a book called Life, Love, and Internet Dating. Then he got the idea that he should do a podcast on relationships. He connected with a 40-something-year-old African-American woman who specializes in relationships, and voila, Love Life, the podcast, was created. So you might be wondering, what can these two tell me or tell you about love, especially since they seem so very different? So let's ask them. Please welcome back to Another View relationship expert Alvean Lyons. Hi, Alvean. How you doing?
Guys.
Good to see you. And Doug Weiss, executive turned author of Life, Love, and Internet Dating. Hey, Doug.
Hi. This is so strange for me.
I know. It is. Well, if you think it's strange for you, listen, let me let the audience know. Once upon a time, you were my boss.
Well, I like to think of it as we were colleagues.
We were colleagues, right. Absolutely. And now you're off on a whole nother track from executive life to author life.
Yeah. Well, life just keeps happening, and sometimes we write about it. And that's what happened in my case.
Absolutely. So if people can see you, if you're streaming us live or at anotherviewradio.org, you can see Doug and you can see Alvean. If someone were walking down the street and the two of you just appeared, they probably wouldn't think, oh, they'd make a great relationship pair in terms of teaching people about relationships because you are so different. So what makes it work, Alvean?
I love him. In all the appropriate ways, because we're both happily partnered.
That's right.
Douglas has a wonderful, wonderful partner named Peggy, who is just the light of his life. And I have just recently celebrated my 21st year of marriage to the love of my life, Matthew Lyons. So when I say that I love him in all the relationally appropriate kinds of ways. But there is this beautiful romance that we get to enjoy as friends and as partners on air. We found that even after just a single phone call together, that there was just this incredible chemistry intellectually and emotionally that really made for good conversation, that lent itself to the ability to have real honest dialogue about things that a lot of times people don't talk about. It's the being able to peel back the layers in a safe place with someone that you trust, who is honest about their own experiences and are happy to be honest with you about their experiences. And then when you kind of add to that, are willing to be completely naked for the world where those things are concerned. And it's an interesting combination to find.
So Doug,
and by the way, I want to say that's if you couldn't have written a better prescription for a great relationship. If you just listened to what Alvean said. Those are, in fact, the kinds of conditions, and this is what I write about, that it takes to build a sustainable relationship with someone.
So when you were thinking about the podcast, you'd written the book, you're kind of, it was a catharsis, I would assume, a little bit cathartic in terms of your being able to write the book.
At times it was surreal.
But when you decided you wanted to do the podcast, what made you think of Alvean, and what made you say, this just might work?
Well, in the beginning, I knew of Alvean, but I'd never met Alvean. So, but I knew that, as you said, people may not want to listen to a 70-year-old white guy talk about relationships. I mean, yes, I've had some interesting experience, but that's all I bring to this game. Alvean's actually the expert, and so I knew I needed someone to work with and kind of bounce off of. And so I started asking around, and you and Lisa and other people one name kept coming up. So I said, well, I have to meet this person. And so being a fairly direct individual, I just wrote an email and said, hey, you don't know me, but here's some people who can probably vouch for me. And I have got this crazy idea. I wrote this book, and I want to do this podcast series, and I'm looking for someone who could work with me and would bring a different perspective than mine. I hit a quinella. I mean, not only did I find someone young and female and an expert in relationships, but then the unforeseeable thing, which is, it matters not, but matters that I'm white, or as Alvean likes to say it, I'm vanilla, and she's chocolate.
Absolutely. And love is the universal language, but we all come at it from such a different perspective all the time, Alvean.
Because we bring our experiences into it. So despite the fact that love may be universal, our experiences are not. So we take our personhood into this exchange, so to speak, and we try to create something that didn't exist prior to that, not knowing what the other person's experiences are. So sometimes you find yourself in a conversation and don't really understand why it's being perceived the way it is, why it's being received the way that it is. And it's a byproduct of the filter of experience in which all of this passes through. So what you're saying to me is not landing on a blank slate. It's not, this is not just one big white canvas. There's a whole picture that has already been painted on this canvas as a byproduct of what I saw as a child, what I experienced as a teenager, the way that I was loved or wasn't loved, how I've been hurt, rejected, or been completely and totally loved previously and had positive experiences. All of those things factor into what the story is going to be between you and I, this new thing that we're going to create, but we never come at this blank slate. So love can be a very complex experience because of that.
And I think made more complex by the fact that often we're pretty much on broadcast and not receive. We're putting out there who we are. We're putting out there our experiences, our expectations, our wants, needs, desires, and not necessarily doing a lot of listening about how that's being received by the other individual, how they perceive us, and what they have to say about their wants, needs, and desires. And so there's this very unbalanced communication that's going on, and that leads to, it can lead to some very amusing moments. It can lead to some very trying moments.
And we want to talk about some of those moments in just a moment. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. Call us with your love story. If you have a question about love, if you're trying to figure out something in a relationship, we'd love to hear from you. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Doug, I want to go back to the book for a moment, because that really is kind of the catalyst for everything else. So life, love, and internet dating. So
Yeah.
in your age range at this point, and with life and everything that's happened, how was it going to the internet in terms of looking for dates? I mean, was it weird? Was it because you're pretty hip and you already do a lot of electronics anyway? How did that play for you?
Yeah, well, I think the surprising thing is that it's no longer restricted to a particular generation. I think you
Right.
find people of every age on the internet who are doing pretty much the same thing. They're
Although
all
there-
looking.
Although there are a lot of people though who say, I would never. Still, I would never go online. I think friends should introduce you, and that kind of thing.
And I actually talked about this. The challenge for me was that I work. I worked long hours. I lived in Virginia Beach. I worked in Norfolk, so I had a long commute each way. And everybody that I knew in my social circle was a couple. So I'm not going to date at work. Bad idea, right? I don't. The truth was, I had no. My hobbies were narrow and few, and so there weren't a lot of mechanisms, even at church, for me to meet someone. And so I thought, well, this will be interesting. And besides, I had a kind of an experiment in mind, which was to understand a little bit about how we could use this medium as a way to meet people, because it's very different than when you meet in person and that chemistry is going, right away. You've got the physical attraction. Here, you're communicating through this really imperfect medium of email, or email-like, instant messaging, and that requires the written word. You have time to think about what you're going to say, or not, and so that acts as a mediator in a different kind of way. And I was fascinated by that idea and thought, well, I'm pretty good with the written word, so maybe that'll work for me, because the first thing they're going to do is look at the picture.
True.
And they do.
And swipe left or swipe right.
Yeah, and I do too. And let's be honest about this. And, which brings up one of the funnier observations I made about people who will post something and put no picture up, like we're supposed to guess. And I keep wondering why people would do that, because eventually, if this gets any further, we're going to meet. So if there's something I shouldn't see, it's going to come as a really big surprise when we go out on that first date.
So tell us one of your stories. What happened to you as you started to do this internet dating thing?
Well, I think probably the first revelation that I had was that there's a kind of energy, a momentum to this process. So there's an exchange of emails. Somebody starts, you or somebody else. The other person starts by saying, I like your eyes, or I love what you wrote about this. And so you start, I don't know, I guess flirting in a way. You're sending messages back and forth, trying to figure out, who is this person, and would I like them, and will they like me? And as this process unfolds, you get to a point where, if it's continuing in a positive way, and often it dies early. You say the wrong thing, or you say the right thing, but it's perceived differently than you intended, and the energy just isn't there. So when you get to that point, you drop it. But if it proceeds, you eventually have to get to that moment where you're going to go out and you're going to date. Now, probably up to this point, there's been some information about your background, how you got to be here. Mm-hmm. Here being a person looking for someone. So who's on the internet, on dating sites? People who've never been in a relationship, and want to be. People who've been in a relationship that ended. People who were divorced. People who were widowed. And we all have this one amazing thing in common that I write about, which is, despite whatever we've been through, we have this incredible optimistic faith that there's somebody out there for us. Mm-hmm. That special person. Mm-hmm. And we can find them. And that's the beautiful part of this. And it's also fascinating to me that we have that optimism. In many cases, people who've been rejected and hurt again
but
and
yet
again.
they still keep believing.
Still believe
that it can happen. Let's go to Bruce at Newport News. Bruce, you're on the line. How are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Okay. Go ahead.
You know,
You're on the air.
I met my wife 17 years ago, and it was on the internet that we met, and she was moving to the town that I was living in, Biloxi, Mississippi, and we had a courtship over the internet, and one time I said, you don't know me, but you will. And she accepted that at face value. And she traveled to Mississippi with her sister and mother-in-law because she had nowhere else to go. And we had one date. And she went home and she said, he's the one.
Wow. Yeah, that's great.
That's the one. Because she believed in romance at first sight.
And today is your anniversary?
Been together for 16 years.
Yay!
Awesome.
Happy anniversary. That's fantastic. Alvean, is that the norm in terms of how this internet dating thing works?
You knew the answer to that question before you asked it. You know that it's not the norm. Unfortunately, the things that we struggle with show up more often when we're in a place in which there are very few filters. And what I mean by that is that when you don't have the ability to be distracted by what somebody looks like, the way that they sound, the way they walk into the room, the way that they laugh with you in a flirting way, whatever it may be, all of those things are somewhat distracting. Beautiful though they may be, but they're distracting. So you actually are not, in a lot of relationships, you're not really dealing with the individual immediately because of all of the things that we as humans get caught in. Mm-hmm. But when you're dealing with them just via text, you really get a more pure understanding of what works and what doesn't work for you, even though, please know that I'm acknowledging that there could be misinterpretations of things that happen a lot when you're writing. But in terms of content, I get to just hear how you think, and how you think drives the way that you act, and how you act is going to drive the way that we interact, and how we interact is going to drive the cadence of the relationship. So when you have the ability to be able to meet somebody in a quality way via internet or pen pal or whatever that is, you may find that those work really well when they work, but when they don't, as Doug referenced previously, they fizzle very, very fast.
So, Doug, when you meet someone or you were talking with someone online before you got to the meeting part, mm-hmm. and you thought that things were working okay because clearly you wouldn't move to the meeting part if they weren't. So what would it be that would snap it? That would say, yeah, no, maybe not.
Well, I think that to tag on to what Alvean was saying, we unconsciously reveal ourselves in what we write, and people bring to that conversation a whole lot of baggage that they may not even be aware of that they're carrying along with them. So I'll tell the quick story that I was in a conversation, and I had made it very clear in my profile. This is the written portion where you talk about kind of who you are, and also what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And I made the point, because I wanted to be clear, that I love the area where I live. I love this community, and I had no interest in ever relocating. This is where my family, friends, everyone, lives. And I was approached, if you will, by a attractive woman who said, well, I live in this lovely town about 300 miles away from you. It's a college town. It's great. I love living here. I've lived here a long time. And she went on and on about it. And I wrote back and I said, well, that's great. I really have tried long distance relationships. And I had a long distance relationship eventually that led to being married. But it was tough. I was never where Susan wanted me to be. She wasn't there when it was a lot of work to make that relationship work. And so I was very, blunt about it and said, in my experience, it's very hard to maintain. And because I didn't want to lead her on. And the next message that I got was, well, I could consider relocating, but maybe living in two places would be interesting. And I thought, oh, okay. I hope she heard me. And then so I responded again, and I said, yeah, that could be interesting. I just want to be clear. I'm never going to move. Whereupon the next message stood the hair up on the back of my head. She said, "You men are all alike." And I went, what? And she said, "Bait and switch." And I said, no, I'm thinking to myself, that's exactly what I'm trying to avoid here. How am I baiting and switching? Wow. And it got so bad, I have to say, and just to wrap the story up, at one point, she was stalking me online, and I actually had to block her because she was so angry at apparently feeling rejected by my unwillingness to move.
So, Alvean, one thing that struck me about Doug's story is the mere fact that in this original conversation, we're talking about living together. I mean,
we went right to the
right. I mean, isn't there kind of a dance that should happen?
There certainly should be. If it didn't happen, there certainly should have been one. And it's this thing that women struggle with all the time, because we get mixed messages sometimes that, we didn't say what we really meant from the beginning. So then, the fact that we wanted a commitment, but most men really want, let me figure out if I even like you before we start talking about commitment. Mm-hmm. So we struggle with, when do you tell someone what you really want in a relationship? And so some women don't know how to do that quite so gracefully. And as a result, it ends up being almost like an interview. I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, before we've even figured out, is this even somebody that we should be talking about this with? Exactly. So in that situation, it's a perfect example of, here are my expectations up front. I haven't even figured out who you are as a person, like none of that. So we didn't dance. We just literally went to, we skipped the dance and went right to the next thing,
So, my goodness.
So it's a little rough, but figuring out the right way to do that really relationships are about a gentle unfolding of our personhood, with each layer being sincere, honest, and principled. So there at no point were you dishonest about yourself, but you don't reveal layer 12 on day 1.
Mm-hmm. So you agree with that, Doug?
Oh, absolutely.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. We're asking you to call us and share your love story. We'd love to hear from you. Evelyn joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Evelyn. You're on the air.
Hello. How are you guys today?
Okay. How are you?
Good. I'm enjoying the conversation. I just wanted to share my relationship story with you. My husband and I just celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary on the 22nd of August.
Congratulations.
And
yes, congrats.
Thank you. We actually met over the telephone.
Oh.
A co-worker and I were, when we probably should have been working, we were sitting around talking about relationships, and I said, I just want to meet somebody. I'm not interested in a relationship. I just want to go out and date. So she starts scrolling through her phone. She says, "Evelyn, I'm going to hook you up today." And
every girlfriend wants a girlfriend like that, right? Every single girlfriend wants a girlfriend like that. Oh, my goodness.
And so after about 20 people she listed, she said, "I know, I'm going to call Tracy." And so she called Tracy at work, and he's completely blindsided. And she said, "Evelyn, Tracy, Evelyn." And so we had this little talk, for about 10 minutes, and both of us had to go back to work. So we exchanged numbers, and we talked on the phone for probably about 2 weeks, sight unseen. Mm-hmm. And then we finally decided that we were going to meet up. And so we met up, and we've been together ever since. We dated for 7 years, and we got married in 2014, and it was a match made in heaven.
Oh, that's
Yay.
A fantastic story. Thanks so much, Evelyn, for that. So again, it's about the conversation.
It has a lot to do with it.
And getting to know that person on that level after you get through the whole physical thing.
Well, we've talked about this before, that even in the texting back and forth, but this unfolds again when you meet the first time, there's the ritual of telling your story.
Okay.
Your story is how I got here, right? Mm-hmm. But it takes a lot of affirmation in the beginning and a lot of positioning to make sure that you've conveyed who you are and what you're about and what your hopes, dreams, what you're looking for in a relationship. It's an important, and you can't hurry this up. If you try to, as we just discovered with the story about moving right to where are we living together, you have to let that mature. But if you take the time, you also have to understand that the storytelling doesn't necessarily just stop. And on one date that I was on, after I had been out twice before with someone, and we'd had a lot of texting back and forth unfolding our story, I tell the story that we were having this lovely dinner and kidding around with our server, and it was very obvious. It was a great ambiance going on. It was very upbeat. And then all of a sudden, this woman turned to me and had this very serious look on her face, and she said, "Tell me again what happened." And I have to tell you, this doesn't reflect well on me, I suppose, but all the energy just leaked out of me at that moment. I thought, oh my gosh, am I going to be like 3 months from now still explaining what happened? Yeah. And it was all the fun of the moment, all the getting to know each other stopped. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I would turn on the spotlight, put it on me, and we'll sweat the confession out of it.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about finding love in all the right places with relationship expert Alvean Lyons and Doug Weiss, author of Life, Love, and Internet Dating. Alvean and Doug are hosts of the new podcast called Love Life, and we'll tell folks where to find it in just a little bit. I do want to go to a rather serious subject for just a moment, because I've been thinking about this in terms of what's been happening with the folks in Houston and in southeastern Texas and all that's been going on with the flooding and so forth. And a lot of times when people face catastrophic events in their life, it either pulls the relationship together
or it tears it apart.
Or it tears it completely apart. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking about those folks, Alvean, and I know right now it's all about, food and shelter and, those things. But what should people also think about in terms of their relationship and keeping that family together, that togetherness in spite of all of this?
Well, I love that you introduce that into the conversation, because one of the things that is happening, and some people might have seen it on social media, but Brene Brown happens to be down there, and they're looking for licensed social workers to come in, because people forget about the magnitude of the psychological impacts of being in those kinds of circumstances. Yes, there's the physical need, you have food, shelter, water, clothing, all of that, but one of our fundamental needs is safety and psychological safety, love and support. So there is an element that really fuels the health of an individual that is beyond the physical components. So yes, you're 100% right that under these circumstances, you can see the best and worst in a relationship because of that magnitude of stress. How we each process that level of stress is very different. Mm-hmm. And for some of us, we internalize it and then it shows up later on. For others of us, we emote it immediately. It runs the gamut. But what is extremely important in these periods of time is making sure that we are supportive one to another on that psycho-emotional level, what's going on, how you're processing what you're seeing and feeling, hearing each other clearly, not rushing the fact that when somebody says, oh, but I've lost everything, and then the immediate response is, oh, but you're going to be fine. Let me process the fact that I've lost everything. Let me tell, as Douglas refers to, let me tell my story about all of this, because I am just digesting what is happening to me. And it's not an ingratitude for the fact that someone saved me or that I have my life, but it's the fact that I don't know what to do with all of these feelings that are just as tumultuous as the storm that we just came out of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you want to respond to Doug?
Well, I'm going to bring it down to perhaps a much narrower and personal perspective, but it is unfathomable to me to think about this tragedy, to lose literally everything. As close as I can personally relate to that was the loss of my wife to leukemia after 7 years of illness. And for us, that was an incredibly trying time. But it certainly brought us closer together. In fact, I would say that the gift that God gave us in that experience was a deeper investment in each other than we had up to that moment. And in the end, it was transformative. And I believe that tragedy is, you can't put a good face on this, but in the end, I mean, Scripture tells us that God works to bring all things to a good end. And he certainly did in this case, and that's been my life experience, that if you open yourself to, not to the experience of the moment, but to the experience, and be receptive to how this can be an inflection point in your life, that there's something to be gained at the other end of it. And that's, it's going to test the mettle of any relationship deeply.
When I read your book, and Doug asked me to write a little blurb about what I thought about it, and I want you to talk about this. So, Doug, at the end of the day, there was something you discovered in the book that you discovered throughout all of the relationships, and it had to do with yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think probably the biggest revelation for me was it put me in touch with a relationship that I had with God that I was always aware of throughout my life, but not so deeply. It reconnected me with that higher sense of myself, and seeing that in others, seeing that in every person I encountered, and understanding that my experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, were an object lesson for both of us about how to live, and how to live our lives somehow in accordance with a sense of what we want for ourselves, what we want for others, what we want out of life, what we hope, what our purpose here is. And I'll cut to the chase and say that probably the lesson for me was that the reason for living is not I attained this job or I acquired that status. It's to be the best Doug I am able to be. And that's the purpose of life, to just keep working on this work called Doug. And it, there's no end there. There's no, you never get to the point where you can sit back and rest on
and
your...
say, I've done it.
Yeah, I am perfect. Sorry.
But Alvin, isn't that really what it comes down for every person? Because you can't be in a relationship if you're not in a relationship with yourself.
Absolutely. And I tell audiences this all the time. I said, look, if you're not growing, you're dying. There is no holding space. We are all growing in some way, or we're dying in some way. And we have to, as morbid as that may sound, I'm really talking more about the development of ourselves and the development of the relationship. That there should always be a leaning in where the relationship is concerned. And growth isn't always about the relationship is growing because we like each other more and more and more. But it might be that we're understanding some of the dark spaces that exist in both of us. It might be that I finally get your pain. I finally hear your pain. I finally see fully who you are. All of those things are part of the growth process. So we have to be open to that, but recognize that the health of every relationship is a byproduct of the consistent leaning in and growing inside of that relationship.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Call us and tell us your love story. Rosa joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Rosa. You're on the air.
Hi, how are you guys today?
Rosa, turn your radio down, okay?
Okay.
There you go. Yes.
Alrighty. Yeah, I was calling because I have made many attempts to meet people using these dating apps and websites. And, each one kind of has a different approach or characteristics, if you will. So I'm wondering if your guests can recommend specific apps or websites for people who really are looking to actually date and not necessarily, hook up.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it, Rosa. Thanks so much.
So we can say which sites not to
yes,
use.
Exactly.
I'll invite Alvean to respond to this too, please. But in my experience, there's not a lot of difference between them. And I know that they spend an awful lot of marketing money trying to convince you that there is. And then they have some special algorithm, and they have some special this and some special that. And, there might be a small grain of truth to this. I actually worked in the internet industry for many, many years on major public-facing sites, so I kind of understand what goes on behind the scenes and how search algorithms work and so forth. And I have to tell you that I don't believe that there is, at the end of the day, sorry, internet dating industry, but I really don't think that which site you're on has a whole lot of difference, makes a whole lot of difference. I think what makes a difference is some practical things, provide a picture of yourself, not hiding behind, in a hot tub, provide a picture of yourself, not your dog, provide a picture of yourself that I can actually see you. And look, if people are not attracted to you, better to find that out now. But if they are, then now you have a basis to move forward. And write about yourself honestly.
Because you talked about the whole profile thing. You really encourage people to spend some time with that.
Absolutely. Now, so I'm a writer. And I want to tell you up front, it took me 5 tries to figure out how to do this. So there's no great prescription. But Alvean said it earlier. Be honest with yourself. Be honest about who you are, what you want. This is a filter. Don't think of it as a way of rejecting people. Think of it as a way of attracting the people that you would want to be attracted to. So if you spend a little time thinking about that and talking honestly, you'll serve your end far better than worrying about whether I'm on X.com or Y.com. Because in my experience, having tried 4 or 5 different sites, not a bit of difference. And I kept running into the same people much of the time.
Okay. Let's go to Catherine. Catherine, I'm not sure where you're calling from. What city are you in?
Well, I didn't say the city. I'm calling from the Northern Neck.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Thanks so much for listening. And what's your question or comment?
Well, I'm calling because I am 60 years old, and I have a lifetime of failed relationships of men who are emotionally unavailable, and I'm trying to understand that. I've had a lot of counseling over it because a couple of times it was through marriage that, was not successful, and, I do understand something about my childhood, but, I just now, again, coming out of something for 14 months of someone who is emotionally unavailable. And, I've got to stop this.
Okay, let's let our experts chat with you. You want to start, Alvean?
Well, okay, so, Catherine, you may not love my answer. Okay, so the thing that is really trying about the dating experience is the fact that the single common factor in all of our dating experiences is us. So if we find ourselves attracting the same kinds of people over and over again, then there is an element that is an us thing that we have to be able to examine. And I did hear a reference, counseling, which is always a very smart thing to do. I'm a fundamental believer, and there's nothing shameful about caring about yourself enough to make sure that you're healthy on the inside. What I would say is that a lot of times we search for the completion of something that we're struggling with on the inside. And what I mean by that is if we're struggling with our unworthiness, we're looking for someone else to help us feel worthy. But in so doing, we often attract people who do exactly the opposite, because our unworthiness of a good man, a good woman, a good partner, a good friend, our sense that we are not worthy of that often attracts people who are predators of that thing. So when we are whole, we attract different kinds of people, to the point that there was a Jimmy Evans, who is happens to be a Christian marriage and family therapist, used to have shows on television for years. But one of the things that he said is that he used to be very predatory, emotionally predatory. And nothing irritated him more than a very confident woman. So he liked his wife a lot because she was, unfortunately at the time when he met her, she was very insecure. And that was very attractive to him because it allowed him to do what comes natural to him to do. And when she developed, when she changed, it forced him to either change or the relationship would have ended. So that is to say that when we are whole as women, the men that we repel are the men who can't prey on us.
Amen.
The men that we attract are the men who find that thing, our confidence, beautiful, and they tend to want to complement that thing. So my honest advice would be that when you're seeing this level of commonality, it's not a one-off, but it seems to be constant, then we have to step back from the game for a little while. Go back to the training, go back to the self-evaluation, go back to, and everybody wants companionship. You can have friends in the process, but there's a difference between friendship and looking for romantic companionship. Work on the wholeness of you first. Recognize that you are deserving. Let yourself off the hook about some of the things that have been in your past. Close the door to those things so that you're not opening a window to a man who's not worth you.
Yeah.
Catherine, I hope that helps.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, at the risk of injecting some levity, Paula Poundstone has this funny bit that she does about her cats eating rubber bands and spitting them up. And I don't know why the cats keep doing that. Maybe they think they just got a bad batch last time. But there's a point to be made here, and that is that we have patterns. And we all have patterns. We keep seeking the same person. And at some point, you have to step back and look at that and say, if I keep fishing with the same bait and I keep catching, the same fish, and it's not one I want to eat, then maybe I ought to change the bait. Right. So, not to be blunt about it, but if you keep finding relationships with people who are not emotionally available, it's probably because those are the people you sought unconsciously. And I would underscore what Alvean said. You have to be whole in yourself, and you have to be very honest with yourself about how you are playing out patterns in your life if you want to change that cycle.
Okay. Vanessa joins us from Williamsburg. Hi, Vanessa. You're on the air.
Oh, I love this. It just keeps me thinking about my girlfriend, and I love it, I love it, I love it.
We love you too, Vanessa.
Aw. So I just want to reiterate, when I finally decided to grow up and just be the real me instead of, what I expected others to expect of someone in, say, my position or my career or whatever, that, when I finally became cognitive or, when I realized that what I just needed to be was myself and the right person would love me no matter what, it fell all into place. And my girlfriend and I have been together. It's coming up on 6 years. We've moved in together, and it's the greatest love I have ever had in my entire life. And it's one that I cannot physically, emotionally see myself without this person in my life, without just, and it's not like the sexual thing. It's just everything. It's like the perfect person because I allowed myself to be the real person that she needed to find, and I needed to find her.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Thanks so much, Vanessa, for the call. We appreciate that.
Indeed.
So, sounds like she let her.
It always starts with you.
She was honest.
Yep, it always starts with you.
Herself. Absolutely. Let's see if we can get one more call in. Rod joins us from Hampton. Hi, Rod. You're on the air. Okay.
Hi, how are you guys?
Okay, how are you?
Doing great.
Okay, we only have a few minutes, so tell us your story real quick.
So I actually met my wife on I don't know whether it's okay to say, but on OkCupid about 3.5 years ago, and she actually only posted one photo. It was of her actually walking away from the camera, but she had a really nice write-up about herself. Some of we had shared interests, and all I had was to go off of that photo and what she said. I thought she was interesting. I reached out to her. We spent about a week and a half, maybe, talking on the phone, or actually just texting. And we had a blind date. And, moral of the story is I was a very lucky guy. I kind of went off of the mystery of meeting her, and we had a great relationship, and we ended up getting married. And, we really enjoy our time together.
Oh, so, fantastic! Congratulations.
I feel like you have to be open to communicating, as you guys said, and also sometimes you just have to, wing it and see where the universe takes you.
All right, Rod. Thanks so much for the call. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
See where the universe takes you, Doug.
That's right, and it's a journey. I mean, if you go into this process with a specific set of expectations about what's going to happen, I think you're not serving yourself particularly well.
Right.
I think you really need to go in with an open mind, and whatever happens, you're going to meet some interesting people, and you're going to have pass some pleasant time. And if you meet the love of your life, well, great. If you don't, you don't. I didn't. At the end of my book, I talk about the fact that, I thought I had found someone. It didn't work out. But I knew I was going to be okay. I knew my life was going to go on, and in fact, when I met Peggy, it had nothing to do with internet dating. It was, in fact, we both went to a cocktail reception that friends threw, and neither of us wanted to be there. We were both trying to leave.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left in this segment, so talk about Love Life. We're in the process of creating the podcast now, and where will people be able to find you eventually, and all that good stuff?
Well, through Apple iTunes, and it's, we are posting them on our blog site, which is www.lovelife.digital.
Yes, it is.
And every week we'll put up another podcast that you can listen to. And if you want to subscribe to it, every Sunday you'll get another link, and you can go in and read the latest blog, and you can listen to the latest podcast, and become part of our extended family.
Yeah, absolutely. And we
family.
do want people to call and to tell us their stories.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what makes it exciting.
Write to us. It's Alvean at lovelife. Digital, and Doug at lovelife.digital, and tell us your stories, and we'll include them. We'll talk about them. Right?
And in full disclosure, I am helping Alvean and Doug to produce these podcasts.
Helping.
And so it's very exciting, and it's very different because the two of you are different, but yet you complementary, and you know what? Love really is the universal language between the two.
Oh, it absolutely
is. Which is really
that's so
nice.
Nice of you to say. I love working with both of you. I think, wow, what do I get to do for a living? I get to work with two fabulous women. I mean, how good is that?
Poor Douglas.
Poor Douglas, right? The website again is www.lovelife.digital. And podcasts come out every Sunday.
Yes,
and we appreciate both of you being here today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Barbara.
And we'll be right back.
Ebony and ivory live together in perfect harmony, side by side on my piano keyboard. Oh Lord, why don't we?
It was just a perfect way to end that segment. I just had to do that. Art Imitating Life is just one way to describe the romantic comedy Finding Boaz. The pain of a real-life breakup prompted Morgan McCoy to share her story with movie audiences and to tell it in a comedic way. The Newport News native recently spoke with our Lisa Godley about her first feature film at the movie's premiere in Hampton, Virginia.
When you're a little girl, you dream of your wedding day. And one day, that dream becomes a reality, right?
Where's your man?
Or not. I'm okay, guys. I don't need a man. It's actually based on a true story, my life of experiencing a failed engagement over 8 years ago, and I thought it was going to crush me completely, and it did for a moment, but in the midst of that, I realized how it's important to find the value of yourself and to know what God has called you to do, your purpose, your passion.
Morgan Avery McCoy not only directs and produces the film, but stars in it as well. Her character, Tori Young, a young woman desperate to find a man, is aided in her search by her cousin, played by comedian and actress Coco Brown.
Attention! Welcome to How to Catch a Man School. I'm talking about Ruth. What did y'all go to church? Y'all don't know the Bible.
Brown is no stranger to the big or small screen, commanding scenes in movies like The Single Moms Club, Ted 2, and each week in Tyler Perry's For Better or Worse. Her character Jennifer is funny, feisty, and quite jealous when it comes to her man.
Don't you want me? No, bitch, I want you. Okay. No, I'm cool. I'm so cool. I'm so cool. I wore my checker trick shoes because I'm here to check a trick. Okay.
Brown transfers her comedic timing and sassy style to her character Nell in Finding Boaz.
Okay, out of all the fields she could have went to, she went to the field where her man was. And she probably gave Boaz the eye. That's why he gave her all that extra food.
McCoy, who married her real-life Boaz in December of 2016, says she wanted to be able to address the pressures that so many women go through to meet someone and find love.
Statistically, 48% of African American women will never be married, which is a huge statistic compared to women of other races. And so I use this as a means to address the issue of loneliness in the church, specifically in the Black community, and talking about some of the stigmas that go along with singleness. And sometimes we don't want to talk about it, but I think we should. And I think comedy is a great way of addressing topics.
McCoy says for 8 years she'd start and then stop writing Finding Boaz, but last year she was determined to sit down and complete it.
Putting the movie together itself was about a 7-month process.
She shot the film in Hampton Roads and Richmond, Virginia, and used actors from the area as well. Hampton native Keisha Africa Lucas is one of them.
It's wonderful to see so many people from the area, Hampton grads as well, but so many people from the area who have such talent. You know, it's not just, a mom and pop operation where we're going to have, Cousin Mabel just because she's Cousin Mabel. But there are people who have real talent, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And she didn't just gather a bunch of folks, she gathered some talented people. And it's wonderful to see that talent showcased, here in Hampton.
Keisha plays Ashley, a woman of God and mother of 5 who offers McCoy's character a biblical approach to dating.
It's a very real, I think, representation of how we have different friends who just want to help us out. And they see the struggle of a single woman, and they want to help them.
As Finding Boaz makes its way to movie screens across America, McCoy continues to inspire all who see this young writer, producer, and director as a role model by sharing her story and pursuing her dreams.
A lot of times people will tell you, get a backup plan, get a regular job, what have you. But if whatever you're passionate about, you can make money doing anything, period. You might as well make money doing something that you love.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And Morgan Avery McCoy is a graduate of both Hampton and Regent universities, and Coco Brown is a native of Hampton, Virginia. We hope we've shared some wisdom to help you with your love life today. You can listen to this show again by downloading the podcast at anotherviewradio.org. We're on iTunes and anywhere else you go for your podcast listening pleasure. Next week on Another View, the round table with thoughts about Harvey, Charlottesville, presidential pardons. The list goes on and on and on. So join us for next week's show. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer. And Catherine Fink answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Enjoy your holiday weekend, everyone. And thank you so very much for listening to Another View.